In this video, we're going to look at solving some quadratic equations by factoring. First and foremost, I want to point out we have what's called a zero product property. So if the product of two factors or more than two factors is zero, then one of those factors has to be zero. So x times y equals 0 if and only if x is equal to 0, or y is equal to 0, or both of them are equal to 0. I mean, think of it. If I have 0 as one of my factors here, whatever I multiply to 0, what's the result going to be? Will be 0. And we're looking at finite numbers here. Like, what if x was 3? What would I multiply to 3 to get 0? So one of those has to be 0 in order for the result to be 0 as well. So on these problems for number 1, I want you to solve. It didn't say factor the following, it says solve the following. And here we have an equation. Equation is where we have this equal sign in here in this statement. So if I have x plus 3 times x minus 2 is equal to 0, then we know either this x plus 3 must be 0, or the x minus 2 must be 0. One of these must be true in order for the whole term to be 0, the whole product here to be 0. So when I solve this, we'll have x equals negative 3, or x equals a positive 2, and those are my two answers for this equation. So if x is one of those two, this expression will be 0. How about number 2? What if I have 3 times a 5x plus 1 times x minus 7 is equal to 0? So this is factored for us. Therefore, what we can do is we can say either 3 must be 0, or 5x plus 1 could be 0, or x minus 7 is equal to 0. So when you look at this, look at each of the factors here and set them all equal to 0, because if any of them are equal to 0, then the whole term will be equal to 0 as well. Now in our first one, is 3 ever equal to 0? No, so there's no solution to this equation for us. For our second one, what we can do is we can subtract 1 from both sides, and then divide both sides by 5, and negative 1 divided by 5 is a negative 1/5. So that's one of my answers, negative 1/5. And then lastly, we add 7 to both sides, and we have this x is equal to 7. So my two possible answers for this one is x equals negative 1/5, or x can be equal to 7. And those are my two answers for that equation. So again, the main thing is to set one side equal to 0, factor it, and then split them up. Another one, and these are kind of easy right now because they're already factored for us, but if we have a 0 on one side, and this is factored into two terms here, we can split this apart and say, okay, when is 7 times t is equal to 0, and when is t minus 5 is equal to 0. Now in our previous problem, we only had 3 was equal to 0. We didn't have a variable with it, but this time we have a variable with it. So if I divide both sides by 7, 0 divided by 7 is just 0. So t equals 0 is one of my answers. And if I add 5 to both sides, t equals 5 is another answer. So my two possible answers for this equation could be 0 or 5. Let's look at number 4 now. Number 4 is not factored for us. So the first thing you want to do is make sure one of the sides is equal to 0, so we can apply that zero product property here. So always let one of the sides be equal to 0 and try to factor the left-hand side. So can we factor this x squared plus 5x plus 6? So first we look at the GCF. GCF is 1. We can't pull anything out of there. This is a trinomial. The coefficient is 1, so we take the 6 back there. Are there two numbers that will multiply up to the 6 and add up to 5? Well, yes. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 plus 3 is 5. So therefore we know, well, not equals. We're not factoring. I'm trying to solve this. So this is x plus 2 times x plus 3 is equal to 0. So therefore this x plus 2 could be 0, or the x plus 3 can be 0 as well. So either we have x equals negative 2 or x equals negative 3 as our two answers in here. It's also good to check this as well. Let me do a little check. I mean, we're guaranteed these are our answers if we did all the work correctly, but who knows if we did the work correctly with this. So when I look for x equals negative 2, let's see, what's negative 2 quantity squared, because I'm squaring the x, plus 5 times negative 2 plus 6. Does this equal 0? Well, see, that's 4 minus 10 plus 6. 4 minus 10 to negative 6. Negative 6 plus 6 does equal 0, so it does right, so I know it's the correct answer. And I can do the same for x equals negative 3. What is negative 3 squared? Plus 5 times negative 3 plus 6. Does that equal 0? Well, see, that's going to be a positive 9 minus 15 plus 6. Negative 9 minus 15 to negative 6 plus 6 is also 0. So therefore they both work. So just by checking this, I know these are my two answers. Now you can use the method of guess and check, just plug numbers in for x, but that's a very inefficient way. If you can factor it, you can find the two methods right away for us. How about number 5? What if you have x squared plus 7x is equal to 0? Okay, so again, one side has to be 0. It's already 0 for us. Great. So let's factor this left-hand side. So again, the first off, what we do is try to find the GCF, and this does have a GCF of x. So let's factor out an x. So that's x times x plus 7 is equal to 0. These are linear factors, powers of 1 for x's. So I can't factor any further. So this is a product of 0, so therefore x could be equal to 0. Or x plus 7 can be 0. If I subtract 7 from both sides, we have x is equal to negative 7. So as we see, 0 and negative 7 are my two answers here. You can plug them in and see if they work as well. For number 6, we have a little bit change here. One of the sides is not 0, so we must make one of the sides 0 first and foremost. So I'll add 16 to both sides. And when we do so, we have n squared minus 8n plus 16. 16 is not like the other terms. I can't combine them with those. And so that is equal to 0 for us. So can I factor this? And let's see, oh, this is an n squared. Coefficient is 1. I can take my 16. Are there two numbers that will multiply up to 16 and add up to negative 8? Well, isn't negative 4 times negative 4 16? And negative 4 plus negative 4 is a negative 8. This is actually a perfect square trinomial as well. It's n minus 4 times n minus 4. So when I break this up, when is n minus 4 equal to 0, or when is n minus 4 equal to 0? Well, actually, isn't that the same equation? So we only have to solve one of them. Thus, we'll only have one answer here, and this is when n is equal to 4. Let's try these last two. I don't know if you want to do them on your own or not. Number 8 is a little more difficult for us, but let's try number 7. Again, one of the sides is not 0, so let's make it 0. These are good test questions also. I can have a mixture of sums with 0 on the right hand side and some that don't have 0 on the right hand side for us to work with. But here we have 4y squared minus 25 is equal to 0. Can we factor this? The answer is yes. This is a difference of squares. I don't know if you see this. This is 2y squared minus 5 squared. Thus, we can factor it as 2y minus 5 times 2y plus 5 is equal to 0. So we can split up these factors and solve for them. So 5/2 is one of my answers. And when I subtract 5 from both sides and divide by 2, we get a negative 5/2 as another answer. So my two answers here are either y equals 5/2 or negative 5/2. And another way you can write that also is say that's a plus or minus 5/2. Both answers are correct. Now let's look at number 8. Number 8 say, oh great, look, that's already factored for us. So we can say x plus 3 equals 9, or 2x minus 1 equals 9. And don't do that. That's why I didn't write this down. Don't do that. You can only split those up if it's equal to 0. So here we have to do two things. First off, we have to distribute this to expand this term. So when we do so, we get 2x squared minus x plus 6x minus 3. And that is equal to 9. And here we'll go x squared negative x plus 6x plus 5x. If I subtract 9 from both sides, negative 3 plus negative 9, that's minus 12. And we can set this equal to 0. Now that we have a 0, now let's try to factor, and then we can break it up. So first I'll look for the GCF. There is no common factor to these three. Since this is a coefficient of 2, we'll use that AC method. 2 times negative 12 is negative 24. What two numbers will multiply up to negative 24 and add up to 5? Remember, since this is a negative, one has to be positive and one has to be negative. 8 times negative 3 is a 24. 8 plus a negative 3 is a positive 5. I'll use that one method, x plus 8, x minus 3. Take the coefficient of x squared and divide each term by that. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 3 divided by 2, well, that's as small as it goes. So the 2 can go in front of the x with that trailing 3 with that. So here, this 2x squared plus 5x minus 12 equals 0 is the same as x plus 4 times 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. Let's check it just in case, just real quick. 2x squared minus 3x plus 8x, oh good, that's a positive 5x minus 12 is equal to 0, good. So either x plus 4 equals 0, or 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. So x can be equal to negative 4, or 3/2. So my two answers for this problem is either negative 4 or 3/2. So when you're trying to solve an equation by factoring, make sure one of the sides is 0. It's very important. Make sure one of the sides is 0 before you split it. Okay, because if it was 9, what two numbers can multiply up to 9? It could be 1 and 9, 3 and 3. You can't split them up, okay, with the product. It's only when you have a 0 on one side that you can split up your factorization with this.